Welcome everybody, just slightly delayed, to the latest in our series of ENO Center for Transportation webinars. Today we are discussing transit disruption and innovative partnerships with Tina Quigley at RTC. Ms. Quigley is the CEO of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. She has over 25 years of experience in air and ground transportation and leads the only agency nationwide that is responsible for a region's public transit system, traffic management, roadway design, construction funding and transportation planning, as well as the implementation of the region's plan for building complete communities.
Okay, that's good, Alice. So you can cut it.
We will skip forward. Please enter questions in the question box as we go, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tina.
Okay, so thank you, and I apologize for the delay as well. So I'll jump right in. I want to share with you just a quick anecdote as to why we at the RTC feel it is really important to be leaning in on advanced transit options and innovation. A while ago, I reported to our board that we were concerned about ridership numbers. There was a time we made $6 million a year in profit on our resort corridor, and that profit has dwindled to a whopping zero. We are breaking even on that corridor now. And we know it's because of the options that people have with the Uber and Lyft, the transportation network companies. We don't have scooters yet, but when that comes, that will be yet another option. So I presented this to my board, and note to self, you never ever present a problem without also presenting a solution. So I presented to my board. I had a board member say to me, "Hey, Sunshine," because that's what he calls me. "Hey, I have a great idea. Why don't you get Sparkly," that's our deputy CEO over transit, "and let's sit down and strategize. I've got a cousin in the insurance industry, and since you're going to be losing money here soon, why don't we start to cut your insurance rates? And we'll just kind of hunker down and start cutting costs." And I thought to myself, oh, hell no. That is not how this story is going to be written. We are not going to get to a point where we're cutting and we are slowly but surely being relegated to just being a social service. We need to be competitive. If the industry is changing, then we have to change too. Just because we're government, we do not have the luxury of just sitting back on the business model that we've always had and continuing to move it forward. So I got together with our group. We started reading a book called The Road to Reinvention, and I'll read you one of the quotes, and then we'll get into it, I swear. But change is inevitable. The question is, will you drive that change, or will that change drive you? No matter how successful you are, and I changed this quote for the sake of the transit industry, no matter how many APTA awards you have won, no matter how great last quarter's fare box recovery ratio was, no matter how good your on-time performance is, you are risking it all if you expect your winning streak to automatically continue. Someday another company will come and put you out of business. It might as well be you, meaning you have to reinvent your business. And even though we can't really go out of business, my big fear is that we are relegated to just becoming a social service, which would be akin to public housing, and we don't want that. So with that message, our deputy CEO, Sparkly, who is here with me, she took that to heart, and she started a few different partnership programs with Lyft. And I'm going to turn it over to her to share with you specifically what they are. But in summary, they are a partnership for our paratransit program. And as you know, the FTA doesn't allow you, their rule is if not everybody can have it, then nobody can have it, meaning that if you can't provide service for ambulatory as well as non-ambulatory, then you cannot do it. So we struggled with that, but she was able to overcome it. And then we also are using them for Lyft for a first mile, last mile alternative that has been very successful, and it looks like it'll be modeled in other cities as well. So with that, MJ, if I could turn it over to you and have them share with the technical detail. I know you guys you're all transit professionals, so we're going to share with you the nutshell, but also the technical details as well as to how we were able to do it.
So when I'm not called Sparky, this is MJ Maynard.
Oh yeah, her real name's MJ.
And Tina's right. So if transit folks on the line, you understand the unfunded mandate and the cost prohibitive nature of providing paratransit service. And here in Las Vegas, we continue to, it's a great place to retire. We continue to see our ridership numbers grow annually, year over year. So we're big proponents of public-private partnerships. We reached out to both Uber and Lyft, and the advice I would give right off the bat.
And the taxi industry.
And we did. And that's the taxi industry was not willing to come to the table here locally because they are not 1099 employees. They actually are employees of taxi companies, and the taxi industry did not want to negotiate a flat fee. So we reached out to Uber and Lyft, and we asked both companies to sharpen their pencil in terms of the best cost per mile that they could provide, and Lyft won, if you will. And so, an understanding, we actually looked around at what the rest of the United States was doing. We looked at WMATA and MBTA, and from lessons sort of learned from our peers, we designed a program to start very small, very targeted, about no more than 200 participants. It's small for a reason. One, you want to make sure you're understanding the business itself and the customer preference and how that works. But we also had to make sure that we stayed very relevant and understanding of the Teamsters and 13C issues. So it will continue to be a program that's small by design. But with that being said, we to date, it's been over a year now since the pilot has been in place. We did get permission that the FTA has allowed us to extend this pilot to align itself with a new paratransit contract that's going to be coming out. But close to 19,000 trips to date. Lyft came to the table by putting a site on their driver website, sensitivity training, additional training for how to handle collapsible wheelchairs, hearing impaired folks, low vision folks, and so it's been great. However, to Tina's point, equity is something that we had to solve for. And while Lyft was able to pick up, customers in that were ambulatory were able to hail their trip via a mobile app, the Lyft app. Their pickup time was about 10 minutes. For the folks that were in a wheelchair, we were working with a nonprofit provider, and the folks in a wheelchair needed to call into our call center, and their pickup window was about 45 minutes. So obviously, those two issues, we were not providing equitable service. We met with a local company here in town that received the last TNC license here, and they decided they wanted to start a same-day on-demand service for folks in wheelchairs. So we partnered, and that's a company called Tango. And in order to ensure that this program can be a permanent program, a permanent offering of mobility here in Southern Nevada, we needed to address those two areas of equity. And so
I'm going to clarify something. So this wasn't really their business model.
No.
We knew we were in a pickle here in terms of wanting to take advantage of Lyft and the cost savings that it was giving us for our ambulatory riders. So we needed a wheelchair accessible vehicle solution. So MJ contacted somebody we knew locally,
right,
and she said, please, pretty please, can we partner? And they said yes. Because if you've ever met Sparkly, it's hard to say no to her.
So Tango came to the table with their own software. That means that the equity, the issue number one was the folks needed to be able to hail their trip through their mobile device. They can do that now with Tango. The pickup window we're still working on. The clientele base, we're learning that the folks that are in a wheelchair, they actually have the ability to plan their trip in advance, and most of them are doing that. But that is still something that we're working on with Tango. We have until the end of this calendar year to get that in order. But so far, so good. About 500 trips to date. That service is much more expensive. The Tango service is much more expensive than the Lyft trips. But when you combine the two programs, we're still saving over 50% in operational costs. So it's a win for us. It's a win for the customer because the service they're providing is much better than your traditional core paratransit service.
What are the costs for Tango versus Lyft?
So the cost per trip for Tango, so we pay, just for our core service, we pay $33 for each trip that we provide. Lyft can do that for under $18, about $17.50. Tango can provide that right now for about $63 each way. So much more expensive. But as we continue to grow that model, the cost will come down. But it really has been, it's again a win for us. We're saving money, and a win for the customer because it's a service that they feel that they finally achieve equity in the community by being able to travel when they want and how they want. And then our third pilot we have underway is a first mile, last mile pilot. And again, when you think of first mile, last mile, I think the model you see is a connection to light rail. We're bus mode only here in Las Vegas. but we're still a growing city, and there's lots of development that's occurring outside of our fixed route boundary. And we've got a area in North Las Vegas where Amazon and Fanatics, a lot of the merchandising logistics warehouses are being built, and they're built in an area where there's no transit, or at least it's not convenient. It's about 2 miles away from our nearest transit line. And so they reached out to us and they asked if we would extend our fixed route service. And we said, we will, but you're going to have to pay for it. And so we costed out the fixed route addition, as well as the potential paratransit cost impact. And Fanatics, actually, it's one employer that we're working with right now. We got in a room and said, let's figure out if it's not going to be, because it's very expensive, obviously. And again, talking to folks that are listening, it's at least a minimum of about $350,000 to add another bus into your fixed route system. So we again reached out to Uber and Lyft and asked them to sharpen their pencil. And Lyft came to the table with a deeper discount for the employer. And so we identified 6 routes near the warehouse and 13 bus stops in and around that area. Partnered with Lyft, and RTC, we pay $1 each way. Lyft is providing a deep discount right now, and then the employer picks up the remainder of the cost, and it's been a win. I think we thought we would have to budget about $50,000 just on our end for the first 6 months, and our cost to date has been less than $500. We've provided over 700 trips, and it was interesting. We have instead of the employees walking to and from the bus stop to the front door of if they had walked, instead of taking 726 trips on a Lyft vehicle, they would have walked over 1,740 miles. So it's been a win for the employees. It's been a win for the employer. It was having that private sector company come in and bring to the table that financial partnership.
And you mentioned that it would have cost us over $300,000 if we had extended our route.
And more if we had included the impact of paratransit, growing the paratransit.
Right.
So it's been a great success.
And the last slide.
Oh, and that's it.
Oh, I thought we had the slide too. Okay.
And that is it. And I'm sure you might have some questions for Tina.
So, Alice, I know we rushed through that to try and make up for time, but I figured questions would probably be more appropriate anyways to see what specifically our audience was interested in.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much for getting through that in a timely manner. And just as a reminder to all of our listeners, you can type in questions in the chat box on the side of the screen. We already have a few questions coming in. We might go a little bit past 4:30, so please do go ahead and put your questions in. The first question is specifically about Tango. Is that a company that other agencies can be looking at? Are they regional? Are they national?
They're actually, it's a local company, but the owner of the company partnered with a gentleman that was vice president of paratransit operations for New York MTA. And so that company is, Lisa Marinay is her name. She is doing business as Tango Car with some consultant outside of from New York. So she brought to the table a business partner that understands paratransit.
Is she interested in expanding?
I think so. She actually
maybe a question for her.
Yeah, that's right. But it's a model that can be replicated.
Excellent. Okay, and there's a couple questions about more specifics and data about your first mile, last mile service. We're wondering how many trips per day you have on that service, more or less, or an average, whatever you're able to share. And then also, is there service specifically for the first mile, last mile for wheelchair customers? And do you have any data on the use of that service with people with disabilities?
So that's a great question. For Fanatics, for the first mile, last mile pilot, because the employees have to opt into the program, if anybody needed a wheelchair accessible vehicle, we would have provided that, meaning our Transdev is our paratransit contractor. So absolutely want to make sure that service is available for all. As far as the average number, I have it by month, and remember, Fanatics is a seasonal business, so they ramp up for the holiday season, like Amazon, and so it can be as low as less than 100 trips per month, or as high as 400 trips per month. It just depends on where we are in the season.
Got it. And then also a follow-up on the data that you guys have. Can you talk a little bit about the data sharing agreement negotiation process? Was it easy, difficult? What were some of the challenges to overcome? And then a little bit about how you're using the data that you have and how satisfied you feel with what you ended up with.
I think like every transit agency, we want more data than we're getting right now from Uber and Lyft. But I think Lyft right now, they provide the miles of service broken down by weekday, weekends, the total monthly miles, the total number of rides. Everything's anonymized, but we are working with Lyft right now on the Tango pilot to understand the pickup window, that data, because in order to make this a permanent program going forward, we're going to have to make sure to be able to compare the data from Tango and their software application versus the data from Lyft. So we're receiving enough to give us an idea, generally speaking, of how many people are using the pilot and the number of trips. But we are certainly in discussions to receive more information from Lyft as we speak.
Excellent. Can you talk also a little bit about how the public outreach and marketing was done for these pilots? And if you've gotten any feedback on that or any lessons learned that you could share with other agencies or people looking to try this type of program.
That actually is a big part of the success. So for the first mile, last mile pilot, we spent a lot of time on site at the facility, working in conjunction with the employer to educate folks on what the service could do. But before we even did that, we actually asked the employer for the zip codes of all their employees, just so we could understand where the employees lived in the valley and to determine which routes potentially use as part of that pilot. And we do for the Lyft pilot and the Tango pilot, we actually have an email address where they could communicate with us directly to give us feedback on the trip. We did a lot of outreach at all the senior centers, marketing collateral that we sent out to all of our customers. For the folks that come to our certification center to get certified, we have information there as they're going through the process. And we do the feedback that we receive on the surveys. We do sort of a survey monkey twice a month just to get an idea of was it successful. We heard during the course of that survey that they wanted a video on how to navigate the Lyft app. So we heard them and we developed some videos that folks can go to our website and take a look at how to navigate the technology piece.
Great. Yeah, it's definitely an important aspect of any new program that people are rolling out. Can you talk also a little bit about what had to happen internally at your agency to make a partnership like this successful? Was there reorganization? Did you have to go seek additional funding, or who did you need support from? How did that work from sort of a pre-program, pre-project element at your agency?
Well, I think certainly listening to what your boss envisions is a big part of that, and our board of commissioners, making sure that they were comfortable, making sure they understood the nuances of the program and that nobody would be left behind, meaning that we would do everything we could to make sure that we were totally equitable. That was really important to our board. And funding is, I think we have a skinny funding stream in relation to our peers, so hence one of the reasons that we even started the Lyft pilot. But I think internally we're always looking for ways to be more efficient in a very transparent manner, and the customer experience is first and foremost our number one priority, and having the opportunity to enhance that customer experience was a no-brainer in terms of reaching out to the private sector and helping us devise these programs.
So really, there's a limited amount of approvals that we have to go through. I mean, we as an executive team need to agree that this is what we want to do. We brief our board. We have a board that actually gives a lot of deference to the leadership here. Again, they just want to make sure that we are operating responsibly and equitably. And if we can prove that, they're pretty good about saying, okay, go ahead, give it a shot.
Got it. All right, I think we're going to go one or two more questions. Here's a multi-part one that gets to a bunch of questions coming in about the FTA requirements for transit agencies and how you guys are navigating that. So how are people who don't have smartphones using this service? How are you dealing with the drug and alcohol testing for driver requirements? And what about payment alternatives, cash payment, some of those elements?
All great questions, and all, I mean, it's something that we'll have to address. So first and foremost, we work closely with Tony Anderson. He is our ADA/FTA expert. He guides, so legally we stay in step. We mark.
He's out of DC.
He's out of DC,
not a local guy, and I think a lot of transit agencies use him. Yeah.
And so the Lyft pilot, that is considered premium service. It's same day on demand, and as a result, it's considered non-ADA. And so as far as drug and alcohol requirements go for drivers, that's not part of non-ADA premium service. But the Tango drivers actually are drug and alcohol. They'd fall into line with all FTA regulations. If somebody doesn't have a mobile app, they actually can call into our call center. Lyft has a platform called Concierge, and both Tango has an API to their software, so the technology piece is there, or they can call in advance and reserve their ride. And then cash, Lyft has a way for unbanked customers to utilize the service. And then RTC, they can actually put cash down here at the RTC, almost like a bank account, and then they're charged against that bank account. So we're real aware that we've got it cash or unbanked customers are also handled here. And if anybody wants to contact me after this, I can connect you with the folks that we can provide you more detail on how that works.
Excellent, thank you. And I also do want to remind our listeners that these slides are going to be available online on our website at enotrans.org. And also we do have an upcoming webinar on innovation exchange with Tina. And Tina, do you have a recollection when our listeners can tune into that?
Ooh, I don't offhand. You can't. We'll look it up while you're talking. Hey, I'm looking at the questions up above, Alice, and there's somebody that said, who is the gentleman out of DC that was mentioned during the driver drug and alcohol? His name is Tony Anderson.
He's with Thompson Coburn. That's the name of the law firm.
Thompson Coburn Law Firm.
Great, excellent. And I found the Innovation Exchange webinar. That's going to be on May 7th. So I'd encourage everybody, if you want to hear a little bit more about this, it'll be a more interactive chat type of webinar experience, and you can pick Tina's brain to get more information about these programs and other things she's been doing at RTC. And in respect of everybody's time, I think we are going to close it up there. Please do feel free to follow up via email, and we will post all of this on our website, enotrans.org, where you can also register, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Transportation Weekly. And if you look back to the week of February the 18th, there's also an op-ed from Tina Quigley that talks a little bit more about some of the details of some of these projects too. So I'd recommend checking that out as well. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you both for the wonderful presentation, and thanks for bearing with us as we got started today. I hope everybody has a great afternoon.